All right, we're at the top of the hour, team, and it's great to be back here for our final masterclass of 2024. We're December 27th of this year, a few days until the end of the year, the start of the new year. What a great way to finish off talking about a subject that is highly important for all of us as leaders, but very critical to be thinking about as we move into 2025, and that's the topic of thinking critically. Now, this is somewhat of an umbrella topic because sitting underneath this are multiple subsets of skills, and we're going to be talking about five of those today. So if you've been with us during the month, then you'll see that we've written a number of blogs. We've released video shorts as well as leadership insights on YouTube. We've provided you with the ebook. Now we're going to wrap it up with this masterclass just to really embed the concept and the need or the understanding of the need for thinking critically for all leaders as we try and deal with this so complex, evolving world of business that we're in at the moment. So that's what we're all about. That's what we're going to be doing. And with that, let me just quickly talk about this ebook because we wrote the ebook in a particular way this time as a companion for this masterclass, but also to try and give you some clarity around what we're looking at and how it can help you. So we've written the ebook as a fable, and we've introduced the hero of the story. We've got the guide, we've got the villain, we've got the challenge, as well as the solutions, all wrapped into the ebook. I really hope you took the opportunity to download it. If you did, fantastic. If you didn't, you really should do it now because this is a companion for this masterclass. And in the book, not only is it the story, but it's also provides you with a whole host of tools for each area of skill set that we're going to be talking about. Each of the five skills that we will introduce today, we also include a series of tools that are available for you to use and to incorporate as part of your toolkit, your arsenal for addressing that particular skill set. So please, if you do have the book, grab it if you don't have it with you. If you haven't downloaded it, you can see the link on the top of the screen, ending in masterclass -5. I'd really encourage you to grab it. You'll be able to use it as a reference throughout this session, but also for looking at what tools are available, as well as a whole host of reference sources that we put into the book as well. So with that said, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a heads up. Now, of course, the big question is why are we so focused on this? This whole topic around thinking critically. Has it just come out of nowhere? Well, of course not. And quite frankly, we're just one of a whole host of people, and many of these people far smarter than us, of course, believe that this is an area of increasing importance. To highlight that, governments, yeah. So Singapore government is one case in point, and we'll use them as an example periodically here. But they've released through their learning organization called Skills Futures or Skills Future, they've released a critical core skills framework. And thinking critically is one of three clusters that they're focusing on. So this is not just something we're talking about, governments are talking about it. And of course, we have Davos every January where all the leaders of the world, leaders of government, leaders of corporate businesses, entrepreneurs, anybody who's anybody tends to be there. And they're all talking about business in general, the economy, and what's the future look like. And of course, they're also saying we need to be aware that this is a growing topic of importance. So they did a survey back in their Future of Jobs report in 2023, and the number two items sit in this category, in this cluster of thinking critically, as well as probably in the top 10, all of the areas we're going to cover here today. So highly important that you learn as a leader how to think critically and understand what it means, but be able to implement, be able to embody the skills necessary that when the situation arises, you can actually implement the actions. And that's the essential component to all of this. Is this one thing to be aware, it's another to be able to put that awareness into action. So as we move forward, you might say, well, okay, I understand that. A lot of talk, everyone's focused on it, but why are they so focused on it? Well, it may not be any surprise. And if you remember our fable in the ebook, we introduced a villain, and the villain of the fable was our complex and rapidly evolving business ecosystem. All right. So we know that in business at the moment, technological advances are changing the landscape faster than we can keep up with. Certainly faster than the educational systems are able to keep up with. The upskilling, the reskilling requirements, the challenges that are continually arising at incredible pace, and they're only set to accelerate even more. So if we do nothing, then there's a high probability that we're going to find ourselves stranded. And that's why, for me and for so many other people, this has become such an important ingredient. So what are the consequences, you might be wondering? Well, let's just think about it for a moment. The obvious, of course, is if we do nothing, then the isolation of the business. Now, we've seen cases that go back to, classic examples of, the mobile phone and different companies. The Kodak example with the transition to digital cameras and the whole digital world around photography. So business obsolescence is certainly high on the probability list. But let's think about you as a leader and your ineffectiveness if you're unable to start to utilize your ability to think critically when and as needed. So, two of the biggest areas that fall under this category are problem solving and decision making. All right, so you become poorer as a result of your inability to think critically. So you become a poor problem solver. You become, therefore, unable to make intelligent, perhaps, but the correct decisions. Not all the time, but an increasing number of times. So therefore, the likelihood of mistakes and oversights increases. Now, remember, our world is increasingly complex. Our businesses are becoming more and more complex. Our ecosystem is expanding, but the networking of that ecosystem is becoming more and more intertwined. The relationship between the parts is becoming increasingly obvious and therefore more complex. Picture a swarm of starlings, up in the sky, moving effortlessly. We call this the complex adaptive ecosystem. All right. We have to be able to adapt as effortlessly as it appears for those starlings. So what else happens? Well, as we become further and further adrift as a result of not being able to keep up with this complex ecosystem that we're existing in, then we start to get more reluctant and resistant towards change. So every time there's another change coming over the horizon at us, another disruption that we're facing in our business, another new technology that's threatening to disrupt what we already have in place, our legacy systems, we become more and more reluctant. We become less adaptable, less agile, less flexible, right? And as a result, our communication is likely to suffer as well because we no longer have that clarity. We don't really have our head in the game anymore. We're sort of just going through the motions. Now, what happens then is we end up losing credibility. Our team starts to lose trust in our leadership, competence, and all of a sudden our team performance drops off the cliff. So I know that sounds like doom and gloom, but these are all probabilities and they are increasingly likely as probabilities as the complexity increases. So thinking critically must be high on your to-do list to learn how. And so we're going to look at that and we're going to look at 5 areas. But as you can see, here we call it critical thinking. Critical thinking tends to make it sound like one item, whereas thinking critically gives you that umbrella effect. But if you look at this illustration on the screen, you can see all of the aspects or a number of the aspects sitting behind critical thinking, from analysis to decisions, right? Brainstorming, looking at it from a logical perspective, the way you communicate, the way you problem solve, trying to do your research and searching for the exact issues, finding patterns, etc., etc., all sit as part of this holistic topic. And that's the way we're looking at it here in this framework at the moment. So with that said, let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. And we'll cover this in the next maximum 90 minutes, I believe. So hopefully it'll be of interest to you. But we're going to cover 5 foundational skills that sit as part of the subset of thinking critically. What are they? Well, creative thinking, transdisciplinary thinking, sense making, problem solving, and decision making. Now, we've arranged these in a particular sequence, but that's not to say that they have to be done in that order. So we've done it this way, and pretty much the way that I just introduced it. Creative thinking first, and you'll understand why as we go through and go deeper into each one of these topics, hopefully. But creative thinking helps us see different perspectives. It opens our eyes. It helps us come up with new ideas and broaden our thinking patterns. Then from there, we look at the multidisciplinary ways of looking at this particular situation. So what are we talking about here? Remember our villain. We're talking about this increasingly complex, rapidly evolving business ecosystem. And we want to be able to think creatively about it. We want to be able to think from different perspectives and look from different angles and different disciplines at this problem. And once we've collected all of this data, then we want to be able to make sense of what we've collected and what we've identified. All right, so the sense making, where we do the analyzing. Once we've done that, then we can start to look for the root causes. We can start to look for not just the surface level problem, and typically this is where the novice problem solvers come unstuck. They dive in, they don't take the time to grab all the information, they don't take the time to look at it from a number of different people's perspectives, a number of different industry perspectives, multiple ways and multiple disciplines behind the way they look at it. And then they don't take the time to sort through and analyze all of that data so that when they look at the problem and how they're going to solve it, they can actually have some clarity around it, and they can lay it out so they can go down deeper than just the surface. Like, picture the iceberg, the typical iceberg. It's what lies beneath the waterline that is critical to identify and to get to the root cause. And only once we get to that root cause, and there may be multiple, can we then move to the final step, which is decision making. So we've identified the right problems, and we've come up with several possible solutions, and then we apply our decision making based on the best alignment with our goal, with our objective, with our purpose, with our business needs. All right. And that's the reason we've put it in this sequence. That's not to say, and please hear me, it's not to say that you can't do it in a different sequence. This is our preferred method. So I'm introducing that to you because this is the way that we address it. All right. So hopefully that makes some sense. But with that said, let's dive into the first two of our 5 subset skills under this critical thinking umbrella. The first, of course, is creative thinking, and then we'll move into transdisciplinary thinking, maybe the most or the least well-known of what we mean. Creative thinking, I'm sure many of you have already heard about. Transdisciplinary thinking, perhaps not so much. After I introduce it, you'll probably have a better awareness, and you've probably heard of different scenarios where it applies, but now you'll be able to give it a name. All right, so let's have a look first at creative thinking, and let's try and give it a definition so it has some clarity for you. Now, remember, please, if you have your ebook, you should be able to follow us along. We've laid out the ebook in this sequence as well, and you'll find that we introduce the tools along with our hero, who's Alex, our guide, Morgan, as they go on their journey of addressing specific challenges that they face in the business environment that they're in. All right, in that storyline. Now, what we do with that is we then provide the tools that we use to address that specific challenge. Okay, now, as you look at that, you'll be able to think, okay, so if I'm trying to introduce creative thinking, what is my specific challenge that I need to address? And will these tools be able to support me in being able to address that? All right, so that's how you can use the book. That's how you can use the tools. And then you'll also find at the end of each section, you'll find some reference material that you can go deeper on it. But let's have a look at the definition. So creative thinking really is the ability for us to look at the problem or the situation from fresh perspectives and to come up with innovative, perhaps unorthodox solutions that are not always immediately apparent. All right. So I like that very much as a definition because it really highlights that creative element. It's sort of where, for me, I love my morning brainstorm. It's where I'm in my creative thinking best mindset because it allows me to really open myself up to the possibilities and to really explore things that I may have been closed to before. So it often involves thinking outside the box, as you might imagine, connecting seemingly unrelated ideas. When I was brainstorming with a number of my colleagues, I used to always like to throw in, regardless of what we were talking about, I might throw in the word brick or the word computer, just to really mess up people's minds and to shake them out of getting fixed on a particular direction and to try and help them pause and pull back and think, gosh, what And then maybe they see something they hadn't thought about before. So it's about finding new ways to approach the challenge. Right? This type of thinking really encourages exploration, experimentation even. And the challenge of establishing norms, leading, or I should say the other way around, right? Challenging established norms. And if you've worked with us on our 4X growth formula, one of the areas that we focus on is trying to identify those norms and look at whether they're still serving you or whether they're now outdated. All right. Like your legacy systems, if you're in IT, like your existing HR policies, like some of your leadership styles. Are these established norms that you've grown into that become your habits? Are they still serving your cause? And that's what we challenge our clients with quite often. And this is the same type of thing that creative thinking really helps you to look at. So if you really want to dive into it, brainstorming is a great way. Set yourself a question on a particular area or a challenge and throw as many ideas as you can come up with at it. Bring the team together. So you'll find that it leads to breakthroughs and quite often very novel solutions that never would have come to the surface had you just stuck with your typical task-orientated approach. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight. I just need to clear my throat just a moment. All right, there we go. So if we think a little bit broader now at creative thinking, I love this image you can see on the screen. At first glance, it looks like just a very abstract, colorful swish of paint. But as you look a little bit closer and you study it a little bit more detail, you can see the fantails of these fish, these small goldfish. And they're extremely beautiful fish, but the image and the black background is so striking. And it really, for me, portrays this mindset of creativity. All of a sudden, I'm in this environment of blackness, darkness, and I'm hit with this vibrant, bright, colorful environment. And what that immediately does for me, at least, and this is part of creative thinking, is it says, okay, so what this image is showing me is that I might be a little bit closed off. And I maybe need to think about, what am I missing? Yeah. So in team coaching, we often talk about the 13th fairy or the seventh generation. And this is a little bit of a creative approach to identifying, do we have all the stakeholders in our focus that we need to have when we're looking at our stakeholders in the ecosystem? Similar concept here. Do I need to expand my perspectives? Am I too closed off in my thinking about this whole approach, about this situation, about this problem? Can I come up with some alternatives? Am I defining the problem correctly in the first place? How can I be more open-minded? What about some innovative solutions? Let's throw some things at the wall and see what sticks. If it doesn't stick, no problem, nothing lost. But we didn't waste or die wondering whether that would have been a good idea. Yeah. So creative thinking is really about opening yourself up to the possibilities. Nothing is ruled out at this stage. Put everything down on the table. There's so many great exercises where you can practice this yourself, where you can do this in teams. We're not going to go into those today. You'll find some methodologies in the ebook as part of the tools. Post-it notes. are a great example of how you can use this to your advantage. Do a data dump of everything in your mind in relation to this particular situation. Just get it all out on paper. And then as you look back over your table of post-it notes, can you cluster them? Can you break them into groups of importance? Can you challenge yourself and think, what else is missing? Am I still too closed? What if we, and this is the value from creative thinking. Now, think about that in terms of thinking critically. Why are we here talking about thinking critically? What was our problem? Our problem is the complexity of business today and in the future. It's evolving at such a rapid rate through the technological advances that we have to be able to think from a myriad of ways, and creative thinking is just one of those possibilities. It's going to help us to see things we may not have seen before. All right, so hopefully that's tweaked a little bit of interest for you. Let's keep moving. Let's move on to transdisciplinary thinking. So for many of you, you will know what it is. You just may never have heard the term before. So let's have a look at the definition first. And again, look in the ebook. You'll find the section related to it. And it goes into the detail about a specific challenge that Alex, our hero, is facing. And Morgan, his guide, helps him to work through, and the tools that they use. All right. So this is one of my favorite areas because for me, this is where we get to use systems or systemic thinking as part of this transdisciplinary thinking. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. So what is it? Let's define it. Transdisciplinary thinking kind of refers to the approach that goes beyond traditional disciplinary boundaries, right? And it helps us solve complex problems by integrating and synthesizing the knowledge from multiple disciplines. So it involves collaboration across a diverse range of fields. So just think of your ecosystem. Think of if you're in business and you're doing an exercise to look at your stakeholders, but your stakeholders, you realize, are not the end of the ecosystem. Beyond your stakeholders is the wider ecosystem. It's the economy. It's your community. It's other industries that you haven't considered. So you can go as wide as you choose. Eventually, you're going to have the whole world wrapped up if you keep going and going, but not suggesting you do that. But when we talk about our business ecosystem, we want to push your boundaries a little bit so that you are thinking further afield. So I'll show you a diagram in a minute, which is really useful. We use it in team coaching, but it's really useful to give you a perspective of what we mean by multiple disciplines. So when we talk about this, we're talking about how do we collaborate across this diverse range of fields and achieve this holistic understanding of an issue. All right. And this often again leads us to innovative solutions as well as new perspectives. So you can see between these 5 different areas, you're going to see there is an overlap, which is fantastic, because just because we hit on it once doesn't mean we thought about everything. Now, if we hit on it a second time, the likelihood is we're going to remember it better and we're going to come up with additional ideas. All right. So I'm a great believer in the 4 eyes principle or the 6 eyes principle, where different perspectives from different people, from different industries provide far better outcomes than relying on my 2 eyes and my thinking alone. All right. Now, transdisciplinary thinking is all about that because we're thinking broader. We're thinking the wider ecosystem. All right. So it's essential in addressing multifaceted challenges in particular. And, taking that singular solo view just doesn't cut it. All right. So let's look at my diagram that I want to introduce for you. And this is what we use with let's get me off the screen for a minute so you can see the diagram fully. But if you look at this diagram, you'll see that we have 5, 6, if you include you, the individual, enlarged circles, right? So there's you, and you're surrounded by, let's say, your team at this moment, yeah, in a business context, right? Or your colleagues. And then wider than that is your division or your department. And wider still are the other departments making up the entire organization. So that's just within your own operation. Yeah? But as we all know, we then have stakeholders. Now, some of those stakeholders would fit within that first 3 areas, but then we have external stakeholders, whether they're suppliers, whether they're the government, whether they're our clients, whether they're people that we don't know but may have an invested interest. Let's say a shareholder, all right? The owners of the company. We maybe should know them, but so that opens up a whole new raft of possibilities, as you can imagine. But then let's think even broader. What about our stakeholders? So now we're branching out into other industries, aren't we? And we could draw a parallel path of our competitors and look at the interaction that happens with our stakeholders and our competitors. And who are some of our competitors' stakeholders that we do business with? Suppliers, the government, a whole raft of different possibilities. And then the wider ecosystem again. So when you start to look at it from this perspective, then you start to really have that holistic view. We often refer to this as looking outside in. So we don't try and address the problem from inside that small world that we live in. Einstein has a famous quote about this. I won't recite his quote, but we look at it we take a step back. Imagine the camera. We zoom out. So we get as wide a perspective as possible, or wider picture angle as possible, and see not only the holistic landscape, the complete ecosystem, but as you can see by these small arrows in this diagram, we start to see the interplay between each of the parts of that ecosystem, all right? And we see how the ripple effects. So somebody in the team connects with somebody in a different area of our organization who are connected with a different stakeholder that we didn't know. All of a sudden, there's a ripple effect that may impact us, right? Or if we think about the future and we look to the horizon. So another area we talk about is Horizon 3 thinking as part of this transdisciplinary thinking. Horizon 3 is where you have the status quo. Horizon 1, you have the adjustments, the patches, if you like, the add-ons to that status quo that keep us moving forward, keep us in the game. And then you have that future, that distant horizon where the disruption comes from and either disrupts us, or if we're at the forefront of the curve, we become the disruptor. And these are all parts of this transdisciplinary thinking. And it's such a fantastic way of looking at a situation, a problem. So rather than just look at it for what it is now, we can throw an entirely different spotlight on it and say, well, what will this situation look like 12 months from now if we did nothing, or if somebody else comes along and disrupts this situation for us? Right? So it brings different perspectives. Yeah? And you can imagine, therefore, it opens huge challenges and opportunities depending on how you want to address it. So then you have to become adaptive in your thinking. You have to think about, well, who should we be collaborating with? Is our current collaboration partners going to be able to support us in our need for whatever it is that we're talking about? Do we have to find other collaboration partners? Are some of our stakeholders in the game or out of the game in the future? Right? So there's all of these different things, and we can integrate the knowledge. It's just such a powerful tool once you understand how you can use it and leverage it. So I probably haven't done a great job of selling it to you, but hopefully you get a glimpse of the potential that it brings. So remember, we're looking at it from diverse perspectives. We're trying to create this holistic understanding of the situation, the issue, and we're trying to see how many different innovative ways can we think about and put on the table to see whether it addresses our challenges. All right. So critical thinking, thinking critically, right? Now, not everything you come up with is going to be useful. Right? Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you're going to go down a path, and the value in getting good at doing all these things is that the quicker you can identify the things that are not going to serve you, even though you've come up with these new ideas, not everything is going to be the right idea, and you need to be able to rule them out as quickly as possible as well. And the better you get at doing this, the more effectively you're going to be able to deal with those issues that are not the right ones, all right, or those ideas that are not the right ones for this moment in this period. So with that said, let's keep moving and look at our third area, which is sense making. So you may well now imagine by now we've gone through creative thinking. We've looked at it from a transdisciplinary thinking mindset. And we've got a whole raft of possibilities related to this situation. We've certainly defined the situation, defined the problem. We've looked at different perspectives. We've pulled lots and lots of different ideas. We've brainstormed. We've thrown every talent we've got at trying to make sure we understand what it is we're dealing with. Now we need to be able to make sense of it all. So we've got this room full of data, and now we want to be able to analyze that data to make sense. And that's where this next skill comes in. All right. So hopefully you can now start to see why I introduced our step-by-step concept here, rather than just talk about these 5 skills as standalone. They are standalone. You can be great at sense making and not great as a creative thinker. But then you know that, and then you can either work on it yourself or you can bring other people into the team that fill that void. All right. But collectively, creative thinking, thinking critically, yeah, is the ability to pull these skills into the one room and leverage that collective genius. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to have all of those skill sets to the highest level possible. In fact, I would say near on nobody will feel that ability. So therefore, the team, the collaboration is so critical in today's world. I don't want to digress, but we talk a lot with our clients about shifting from being 20th century leaders to 21st century leaders, largely because of this complexity that we're faced with today. It's not relevant, well, not practical for people to believe that they know everything about everything that they need to know about in today's business world. Those people that still believe they have that knowledge are the ones that are probably out of a job in the next 5 years. They need to be able to work collectively. They need to be able to pull the team together, the team of collective genius that can address the situations as they arrive. All right, so we're now looking at sense making, and what is it we're talking about with sense making? All right, so let's have a look first at the definition. So it's a process. Yeah, you can imagine we're analyzing now. So if we're an individual, if we're a team, if we're an organization, we need to be able to identify, interpret, understand all of the complex, sometimes even ambiguous, uncertain situations, right? And this is a lot of work. So as we've already spoken about, it involves gathering the information. Once we have that, and we have as much as we think is relevant, then we need to start analyzing it. And we need to start to put it into a coherent framework or narrative that makes sense of that data. All right. And the process then helps with the other aspects that we're going to move into shortly, the problem solving and the decision making, completely or particularly when we're faced with new or unexpected events. All right. Sorry, I should come back on the screen. Oh, I'm back. Okay. So, when we're faced with these unexpected events, but we're in this sense-making mode, it allows people to navigate through that complexity and to adapt to that changing environment. Right? Remember we spoke about the horizon, that horizon 3, that potential disruptor that's on the horizon that's heading our way. Then the environment we know is going to change when that reaches us. So let's make some sense of that now so that we can start to plan and strategize and move in the direction that's going to put us at the forefront of how we deal with it. We're going to be able to solve the potential problems before they actually become problems, perhaps, right? Depending on how good we are with this. And then therefore we become better at a parallel important area, which is strategic thinking. All right, now we spoke about strategic thinking last time. Strategic thinking and a lot of this are brothers in arms or sister and brother. They go hand in hand. So if you can make sense of your data, it's going to help with your strategic thinking. But of course, thinking critically is part of being able to plan your strategy very well. So what are we essentially thinking about here? We're thinking about getting some clarity around the ambiguity. Yeah, so you can imagine the complexity. Just think back to that image we had before with our wider ecosystem and the endless possibilities that we could create if we really took the time and built multiple ecosystems. The complexity that exists if we try and draw, if you remember my earlier ecosystem that I had that we use for our 4x growth formula, we had this model ourselves where we use the fishbone as our 4x formula, but around it is the ecosystem. And so as it gets more and more complex, we need to be sure that we can bring clarity related to our issues, our situations, regardless of that complexity. Yeah. So that's one of the things that comes out of being able to do this sense making well. If we are able to do that, then we're able to be more adaptable. more agile, more flexible, right? We can then start to look to that horizon and see the disruptions and make sense of it and say, yeah, you know what? We can see that disruption coming, but we're actually heading in a slightly different way. And we don't believe that that particular issue is going to be a major stumbling block for us. And therefore, when it arrives, we'll let it go through using a cricket vernacular. We'll let it go through to the keeper without doing any damage. So once we've got that clarity, we can be that flexible and that adaptable. That then helps us to communicate with our team. It helps us to be able to look at the information, the data, and analyze it in a way that serves us, not helping us survive, but serves us to thrive in the environment that we're in, and even that future environment. So sense making, whilst it sounds like the boring part of the process, it's a critical component. Because once we've made sense of it, then we can see that future, we can see that vision, we understand our purpose, we understand where we're going, we understand where we need to pivot perhaps, how to strategize for it, and then we can go on to solve the current problem that we're facing. Right? So it's truly a core to this entire theme that we're talking about, which is thinking critically. Sense making is, I would say, at the heart, right? Because on one side, we're gathering all that data. We're really defining what our situation, our problem is. We're looking at it from different perspectives and seeing how much data we can really collect and put on the table. On the other side, we're going to try and solve the issue and then make the decision on which direction we're going to go. But in the middle of both those, we have to be able to make sense of it. And that's what this sense making is all about. So again, critical component. All right. And one of the reasons that is part of this topic. So yes, it probably sounds like the most boring. Creative thinking, exciting stuff, right? You get to bounce ideas, new ideas, throw things. Transdisciplinary thinking, yes, you get to work with other people and come up with different possibilities and look at the broader ecosystem, etc. All great. However, then we come to our good old sense making, the analytics, and we say, here we go, how boring is this? All right, we shut down. Not everybody, of course, but many of us. All right, so with that, we're about, we're right on a little bit past the halfway mark. I think it's a great opportunity if we were to now take a 5-minute break, and one of the things we can do is there's probably many people out there, I'm guessing, that are listening here thinking, come on, Wayne, this is nothing new. And you're right, it's not. The problem is our complexity is increasing. And the way that we need to think about our business is changing. I was talking with, I was a guest on a podcast yesterday, and we were talking about AI. And nothing new about that either, right? Everyone's talking about AI. But what was really interesting was that governments, we were talking about how a lot of governments, and I don't overuse that word a lot, of governments are now leveraging AI to make major decisions. And therefore, the rules that we play by in business in the very near future are very likely to be significantly different to what they are today. And if we're not at the point of being able to think critically about our business and to be able to make sense of the challenges, the situations we face, and we're totally reliant on AI, then unfortunately, I believe that there is not much future for you in that scenario as a leader, because you'll get left behind. And so what I would challenge you to do during this 5-minute break is to have a think about how effective are you as a critical thinker? How effective are you thinking critically and using the things that we've spoken about, the skills we've spoken about so far? How good are you at creative thinking? Where do you practice it? Why do you think you're good? Where's the evidence? What about transdisciplinary thinking? Have you ever really considered how you could use that more effectively to your advantage? Does this give you a competitive advantage? I definitely would argue yes. And then sense making. Are you one of the people that leave this part to perhaps your finance team? Perhaps you're hoping that the IT department come up with the next whiz kid or the next solution platform that's going to come up with all those answers for you. And maybe that's the direction you should be thinking. But please take a moment during this break just to challenge yourself. Where could I be better? What am I missing? What could I do differently today or tomorrow that I haven't done up until now? So please take a break. We'll see you back here in a couple of minutes, and then we'll continue on with the last two of our 5 skills sitting under this topic of thinking critically. Sorry. All right, well, welcome back. And it's time to keep moving on. I'm going to take myself off the screen here because you can't see me behind me. All right, so we're down to the last part of the session, and we're going to be looking at the next 2 items, the next 2 skill sets. And boy, did we save a couple of big ones for last: problem solving and decision making. Now, many of you are going to be sitting there, I suspect, and thinking to yourself, hang on a minute, the things we've already covered in most problem solving models are already covered as part of the problem solving model. And yes, I would agree with you. So let's have a look first at the definition of problem solving. All right. So, all of these things we're talking about are cognitive related. So they rest in our brains, and problem solving is really that process of identifying, analyzing, resolving issues or challenges that, if doing it in a way that's effective as well as efficient, right? The 2 E's, effectively and efficiently. It involves a number of steps, several steps, including understanding the problem, generating potential solutions, evaluating. So what? Hello. That sounds like what we've been speaking about, right? Yes. And then selecting the best options. Now we're getting into new territory. Implementing the right solution. Yeah. So effective problem solving requires critical thinking. It requires creative thinking. It requires transdisciplinary thinking. It requires sense making. It also requires decision making. So there you go, all 5 wrapped into one. It's a fundamental aspect of personal as well as your professional life, and it allows not only you, your team, organizations to overcome the obstacles and achieve their goals. Now, Okay, so why not just throw all the others out and talk about problem solving? Well, hopefully you already see the reason why. The reason why is because each one of those areas is an area unto itself, a standalone. And so the problem with lumping everything like this under problem solving is that we just say, okay, you need to be a good problem solver. But what does that mean? It means I need to be good at creative thinking. I need to be good at transdisciplinary thinking. I need to be good at sense making. I need to be good at decision making. And if we just leave it all wrapped up in one under problem solving, then we lose the real perspective. We don't understand the context. We only see the content, the surface level. And there's the reason why problem solving can be holistic, is holistic. However, there are elements of problem solving that come onto their own. So we're going to look at that as well in a moment. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a reasoning behind why we talk about it in the way that we're looking at it. Now, I always say to teams when we encounter a situation and we are going to use some strategies to try and address the situation, that anyone that tries to solve the problem from this point and where we're standing, again, back to Einstein's quote, is not going to succeed. The only way we're going to be successful is to step away from it, to put ourselves on the outside of it and start to look from different perspectives. Hello, there's that word again, perspectives. And where do we go when we talk about perspectives? We talk about creative thinking. We talk about transdisciplinary thinking. All right. So we want to see it through different eyes. We want to look at it from different angles. We want to hear it from different disciplines, from different industries, from different stakeholders. Yeah. And try and understand the problem at its core so that we can then effectively know that we're addressing the right issue. And quite often, the people that don't have that capacity and dive straight in to try and address the problem that they believe they see are quite often the ones that come up short once the solution's introduced and find that it's not really addressing the challenge that they started with. So as I'm speaking, I'm visualizing relationships, and I'm visualizing the relationship that I have with my wife, and the problem I get in quite often catch myself getting into is trying to come up with a solution to the problem that I hear her introduce without stepping back from that initial content and probing a little bit further to really get to the heart of what is the real problem, and therefore be able to support at a much better level, right? It's almost coaching 101 for the novice. There's an expression, only fools rush in where angels fear to tread, right? So quite often problem solving is like that. Somebody comes up to you, I got this problem, need you to fix it. Okay, let me do it. Bang. All right, let's try and knock this over as quickly as possible. They dive on top. They put the Band-Aid across, but they haven't really addressed the issue, right? The cause. So that's where problem solving really comes under its own. We may identify direct causes, but they may not be the root cause, right? And when you start to use different problem solving tools, techniques, then you can start to really uncover, okay, so, there's multiple paths we could go here to get down to that root. And when we get to the root problem, then we could come back multiple ways to actually solve that root problem. Personally, I believe that there is always more than one way to solve any given situation. And so therefore, problem solving is such a holistic term that we need to be careful. So let's just have a look. It allows us to have this structured approach. All right. We analyze the data, we analyze the situation. We looked at us being creative, we looked at the transdisciplinary aspect, and then we can focus on, well, once we get to that root cause, there's going to be different outcomes that we could maybe aim for. Which one is the one that we're most likely to go to? Well, that's what we're going to cover in the final skill, which is decision making. But problem solving really, when you go into it in this depth, helps us to build an arsenal of experience to understand that seldom is the solution the first thing that comes across the table at us. Quite often, that's more like playing roulette. That's just taking a gamble that this item is the right item. So problem solving helps us work our way through the situation to ensure that we've dug deep and got to the heart of the issue. Yeah? And from there, we can then start to put different solutions on the table. So I know that for all of you, this is probably an area that you've had experience in. For any of you that are in the quality field, my apologies, because I know this will be an area you're an expert in, but for so many leaders, I experience as clients, this is an area where they think they know how to do, but they fall short. And quite often because they hear that general statement. Okay, what do we need to do? We need to identify the cause. We need to define it properly. We then need to analyze it, and then we can resolve it. Well, as we've already discussed, there's so much more to it than those simple words. And unless you have that knowledge, that awareness, and then the means to do those things, then that's where you grab the first solution that appears and you run with it. All right. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight, but problem solving is a extremely important part of this sequence of thinking critically, because it's where you then really know that you've addressed the root issue, and now you're putting some different solutions as options on the table. Then we move to the final part, which is our decision making. So if we were to say, which are the two most common things you hear people talk about, throw these words around, I would say problem solving and decision making would be high on that list, maybe creative thinking as well, right? Would be high on the list. Let's define decision making for a moment, right? So it's really, again, it's this cognitive process, right? And what you're doing is you're selecting a course of action, and you're going to choose an action from among those possible or alternate scenarios, solutions that you came up with in the problem-solving step. So you've evaluated the information, or you're going to have to evaluate these solutions. Look at the outcomes that they probably will provide, once you implement them. And then you're going to look to choose the best one, obviously, that's the most aligned with whatever it is that you're doing, your goal, your values, your criteria, whatever it is. You want to choose a solution through your decision that best aligns with the outcomes you're hoping for. All right, makes sense, right? Might make sense, may not be so easy. So sorry, just bring myself back on the screen, keep forgetting. May not be so easy to identify and make that decision. Sounds so simple, but that's the purpose of it, right? So when you learn to do this effectively, to make decisions effectively, then it really helps in your own confidence, but it also helps you to stay focused and intentional because you know that you've been through a process, step by step by step. What were the process steps to get to that decision? We thought about it creatively. We thought about it from a transdisciplinary perspective. We made sense of all that data. We then dug in to find the root cause. And based on that data and the root cause that we see, we came up with a number of possible solutions. And now I'm about to select a solution that I know based on the prior work is going to have a high probability of being the right solution to address my issue, my challenge, my situation, and to keep us on track with the direction that we want to go. So I feel much more confident. And I'm going to take this step intentionally now. I'm going to take it with purpose because of that confidence and because of that work that I've done that's given me that confidence. Now, this can apply in your private life as well as your professional. And of course, then what it does is you're confident, your team sees that confidence, your team will have the confidence, everyone moves forward, the impact is a much stronger, better quality outcome as a result. So hopefully in what we've spoken about here, you really start to see the value of being able to think critically. Yeah. Before we finish on decision, before we jump into that, let me just finish on decision making, right? So I haven't used the word judgment, but with confidence comes improved judgment sometimes, right? So long as your biases don't get in the way, but your biases are normally reactionary. When you've done these steps, then the logic can step in. The logic, as part of your critical thinking, kicks in, right? And so therefore you end up with improved judgment. You are better within your strategic thinking. You're willing to be held accountable for those decisions. And you find yourself being more open to changes because the scenarios have all been laid out and you've chosen the one based on the work that you've done that help keep you in the direction you want to be. Whether that means pivoting, whether that means looking to the future and becoming the disruptor, whatever it might be, but you've chosen it based on the actions. All right. So therefore, you're going to hold yourself, you're going to be committed, you're going to hold yourself accountable, you're going to take the ownership of that decision. You're going to then continue to be able to apply it strategically in your thinking and feel good about the judgment you've made. And that rubs off, of course, on your team, on your department, on your organization, and your clients see it, everybody sees it. Now, you're never going to be right 100% of the time. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you being more effective in the process, more effective in your ability to think about things critically. Right? So just think 5 skill sets we're recommending you become good in, or if you know you're weak in some, you can either improve or you can start to bring other people from around into your circle of influence to address the situations that arise. Yeah. So hopefully that all makes sense for you. I'm feeling good. Hopefully, from a masterclass perspective, you've been able to follow along with what we're talking about. hopefully, let me get my head out of the way of the screen again. Hopefully, with the ebook, you can see the progress we're making, look at the different scenarios that we put into the ebook as part of our storyline. Look at how Morgan and Alex have addressed each one. Look at how Alex's confidence has grown over the period of becoming better and better and better in dealing with these different situations, challenges, by improving his skills in these 5 areas. Yeah. So let's wrap it up. And if you read the ebook, I'm really curious. You can send me a message or you can put it in the chat window, but I won't see it at the moment. But I'm curious which part resonated the most. Did you find yourself gravitating towards the area where you're already fairly adept, fairly confident, maybe even an expert? If so, that's understandable, and there's no harm in that. However, we also know that if you don't stretch, if you don't move outside that comfort zone, then there's not much growth that occurs. And so we've given you 5 skills that will help and improve your ability to think critically. We've given you the challenge that lies in front of us, the complexity and the rapidly evolving ecosystem that's becoming more and more complex day by day because of the intertwining of various ecosystems through the technological advances that are occurring. And so the challenge we throw to you now as you listen is, if you find yourself gravitating to one of those areas or 2 of those areas, perhaps even 3 where you're already fairly comfortable, and know that these are areas where you largely lean to when a challenge arises, then our challenge to you would be, what can you do to look at other areas? What can you do to improve your skills in, let's say, transdisciplinary thinking, in sense making, in decision making? Now, we wrote the book as a fable because these, in some way, were the questions that Alex was posed with. And as the challenges arose, Alex fumbled, as we all do. And then Morgan, as his guide, came along and helped him see that there is a way forward and there are tools that can be used that help bring the clarity and remove the ambiguity. And so the power of being able to think critically, the power of having the ability to be creative, to look through different disciplines, to analyze and make sense, to find the root causes and identify multiple solutions, and then choose a solution that aligns best with your needs as an individual, as a group, as a company, cannot be understated or overstated. So really just want you to think about that, because quite often what happens, we all do it, is we come to these situations, we come to the masterclass, we hear a lot of good talk, and then we disconnect, we go back, the fires are still burning, and we go back to where we were before we started. So we don't want that to happen. So look, as a final lesson, right? If we think about Alex, the ability to think critically for Alex and for you can become your ultimate competitive advantage. So in a world that's defined by uncertainty, leaders who can embrace creativity, collaboration, decisive action aren't just surviving, they're the ones typically that are thriving. And the story of Alex's journey wasn't just about overcoming challenges. It was about becoming the kind of leader who could face the unknown with confidence, with courage, and with clarity, and lay that transformational groundwork towards true victory in his case. So the challenge is really there for you. Now, I wanted to spend a moment and give you some further clarity here about why we have taken the step that we have to focus first on this cluster. So the image you can see on the screen here comes from Skills Future in Singapore. Now, this is a government body, and they're responsible for introducing learning and development for the population of Singapore, yeah, whether private or professional. And these are on the screen 3 clusters you can see of critical core skills. In total, 16 individual skill sets. Now, what we're doing is we're going to address the 3 clusters one at a time. So today, this month, the month of December, we've spoken about thinking critically. Yeah. Next masterclass and the month of March, we're going to move into interacting with others. And we're going to be covering the 6 skills under that cluster. And then, of course, in June, our subsequent masterclass, we're going to be tackling the final 5 skills under the cluster of staying relevant. Now, of course, for any of you as leaders, these are core, depending on the area that you work in, depending on your responsibility, depending on where you want to go in your career. None of these skills are redundant today or in the future. All right. As we get to staying relevant, we left that to last because between today, 27th of December, and I don't know the date in June, but it'll be roughly 6 months from today, there will have been many changes in our technical advances. There will be many changes within the business landscape. And so staying relevant, we want to be as current as possible when we approach that topic. So that's why we're doing it in this sequence. However, thinking critically is going to be important regardless. Your ability to interact with others will always be important, regardless of how much automation, robotics, AI move into our life, our landscape. And then your ability to stay relevant, which is becoming more and more challenging day by day, will be the icing on the cake, the cherry on the top that you really start to be able to leverage from. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're working through this. This comes from the Singaporean government organization called Skills Future. And so we're sort of following their lead. But as I said, it's not just this one government. Governments around the world are focused on this. You've got the World Economic Forum that comes together every January in Davos talking about these topics. All right, so these are important topics, and we hope we've done it justice in December. We've created a lot of material. We've gone through and created blogs, videos. We've written the ebook. We've delivered this masterclass. Hopefully, we've given people a understanding of why we think it's important. Hopefully you can see that, you can sense that, you can gauge for yourself, of course. The decision is yours. All right, with that said, what's next? Okay, so what's next? Very simply, the month of January. In about 4 days, we're going to hit the end of December. December 31 will be Tuesday. Next Wednesday, we roll over into January 1st, 2025. In some cases, it's a year a lot of people have been waiting for. The year 2024 has been a tough year for many. But January 2025, we kick off the new year with our 5-day challenge, our longest challenge of the year. We start the year with a bang. The challenge is called Master the Art of Stakeholder Empowerment. Let me come back on the screen. Master the Art of Stakeholder Empowerment. Now, when we say 5 days, it spans 5 days, but we're not talking about you being locked into a room for 5 days. We're talking about 90 minutes per day across 5 days. So in total, 5 90-minute sessions, 3 p.m. Hong Kong time each day. It'll be the last week of January. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think it's something like the 27th through to the 31st or thereabouts. So something like that. And this is a challenge that's always well supported. What we're looking at is we're building your ability, right, as leaders. And all of our challenges are based on real case scenarios. They're based on situations where we've worked with clients, whether we coach them, whether we work with them as consultants, whether we're helping develop their people. We identify these situations that are real business case situations and use the solutions that we identify with that client and bring that to the table. So across 5 days in January, we're going to be working with people who join. You can join for free, or you can decide to join as a VIP. More details when you go into the landing page and look at it. But essentially, we're going to be looking at how do we really position ourselves as leaders, as a team, as a department, as an organization, to really maximize, empower our stakeholders. And therefore, the benefit of that is that they become loyal clients who always want to work with us, and we can grow together. All right, that's what we're trying to achieve. We have a huge amount of material that we introduce in this challenge. Now, these are intense. There are a lot that we cover. You will have additional homework, etc. So don't think if you join, it's just a case of sitting passively. Not to be, unfortunately, if that's what you're looking for, if you want to get the most out of it. If you don't, of course, you just want to join and see what we're talking about, that's your choice. You won't get as much, but you'll get all the material, so you may in the future want to do more with it. Okay, so that's what's coming up in January. As you probably know, we have monthly campaigns. So January, we have our challenge. So the cycle starts with a masterclass. We then move into a challenge, and then we finish off with a virtual mastermind, which is an 8-hour session, 4 2-hour segments, if you like, on a particular topic. We try and relate them somehow to what we're talking about. So here we're talking about critical thinking and thinking critically and all that. When it comes to the mastermind and within this thinking critically, of course, stakeholders are a central part of that ecosystem and what we're thinking critically about. And then we move into the mastermind, which is identifying or mastering success behaviors that help you continue along that journey. All right. So January, the challenge, February, the mastermind, next March, the next masterclass, and the cycle starts again. So if you want to know any more, go to our website. Website is the best place to get all this information. You see the link on the screen, coachingforcompanies.com. The letter is not a 4, right? The number 4, FOUR, is not coaching for companies. Coaching number 4, companies.com. Coachingforcompanies.com is our website. That's where you'll find all our stuff. When you're there, go to the footer and you'll find the links to all of our social media platforms: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. We have reasonably large following on all of these areas. So head over there. You'll find a lot of material, all freely available. So plenty there for everybody. With that, let's wrap it up. We're 5 minutes ahead of time, which is always pleasing. Our next masterclass coming up in March is related to, remember, involving or engaging or interacting with others, called Mastering Human Connections, Elevating Inclusivity, Collaboration, and Influence. I hope to see you at the masterclass. I hope to see you at the challenge and at the mastermind. Look forward to catching up on our weekly podcasts, our monthly live broadcasts, or any other events that we host. Until then, farewell. Enjoy the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. Stay safe, stay healthy. See you then. Bye for now.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.